Hello and welcome to Art Laughs with me, Verity Babs. Today I spoke to Ken Cheng. Ken, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ken. I'm a comedian. I think we I met Verity like at a gig maybe 4 years ago.
Mm,
It's been a while.
way back when in the before times.
Yeah, back in Oxford, I think it was.
It was indeed. And why don't you introduce the piece you've picked for us today?
The piece is called A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte.
This is by Seurat, and where have you come across this piece? Why have you picked it?
I picked it because I don't know if you've seen the film Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but it's quite a pivotal scene in the movie where they've gone to an art gallery, the big Chicago museum. Yeah, and they've gone to just have a day off in the museum. And there's a scene where Cameron, played by Alan Ruck, is just staring at this painting. And he's just got this glum look on his face where he's sort of kind of realizing that his life is pretty messed up. And the camera just zooms in on the painting on this small girl's face, and it zooms in further and further. It just gets more and more unrecognizable and more blurry, and it keeps switching back to his face. That scene, the use of that is I think quite unique in film. I don't think very many films do something like that with a painting, at least not to my knowledge. And that's why the painting has stuck with me.
Yeah, there aren't many films that look at painting in such an intense way if the film isn't about painting. Like Ferris Bueller's Day Off is not
Yeah,
about art. But it has,
exactly.
like you say, this really intense scene. And as they zoom in on the little girl, even though this painting is huge, the way that Seurat has built it up is like lots of individual dots of
Mm,
color. So actually, when you zoom in really close on this girl's face, it's just like a void. And I guess he's having an existential crisis, really.
yeah.
Um,
I think we've all had one of those crises, and it's a really just great way of depicting that on screen without any dialogue. It's just amazing, and I think they did intend to try and capture what is great about those moments in art museums. When you're looking at a painting, you have those realizations. I think that was an intention of the scene, was to kind of capture that feeling and do it so well.
it's interesting that you've drawn kind of this pick from a film. Would you say that you kind of consume maybe more films than you consume art?
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't consume that much art in general, which is why I've gone for something with the extra media layer.
And I think that's interesting as well because actually other forms of media that we consume much more, so like social media or films, actually is such a good way to make people go, oh well, actually no, I do know that painting because it was referenced in this film. Because actually
Yeah, I think
films are
so.
so much more accessible and so much less serious to like put on Ferris Bueller's Day Off than to be like, I'm going to do some research about the Chicago Art Institute collection today.
Yeah. It's a gateway. It's a gateway drug to art, film.
What would you say is your, I guess, relationship to fine art in terms of, is that something that has ever interested you, or is this quite like an alien topic?
I think at points in my childhood, I remember I was quite good at art. I was quite good at drawing. My brother is really good at drawing, and I was quite good, but I never stuck with it. And I think I did at the points have an interest, but it kind of got away from me in the same way that a lot of interest got away from me when I just became addicted to video games as a teenager. And so I probably haven't really had much crossover with art, fine art.
It's interesting when you mentioned about video games, because I think that it was really easy to kind of go, oh, video games are not, I don't know, visually enriching.
Yeah,
And I never like played many video games as a teenager. It just didn't really interest me. But when I now watch other people playing video games, or I see screen grabs from video games, some of them are so beautiful and so
yes,
complexly put together
yeah,
that it's like if the designer had just taken that screen grab and decided that, you know what, this is going to be fine
oh
art, and we
yeah,
put it in in a gallery. A lot
yeah,
of it has that like
oh
really deep
yeah.
aesthetic importance, right?
Yeah, it does. Like the technical skill plus creative skill that goes into like designing a video game is really impressive. Really impressive stuff.
I think a lot of people think that they haven't got a good eye for design or for art, and they're like, "Oh, I don't really, I don't easily have opinions about visual things." Whereas actually, that's because they're kind of thinking that what I mean is, if you're in a gallery, could you pick, something that moves you? But actually, the fact that you could go, that
Mm,
character is so well designed, and the fact that their outfit change in this scene,
yeah,
or like how they've managed to do the textures on this
yeah.
weaponry is exactly like honing that visual skill.
Yeah, it's the same with animation, like classic animation. You kind of take for granted like the design of like say Bugs Bunny. The design of Bugs Bunny is very specifically done to evoke a character and stuff like that. And you never really think about that when you're watching those cartoons. But then in hindsight, you're like, wait a minute, those cartoons are so well drawn.
Mm. Well, I think that it was a kind of a shared experience for a lot of people our age of watching the second Toy Story,
Yeah,
where he has his eyes cleaned and he's sewn back together. And there's something so kind of, I guess, like ASMR about it, but it's so visually pleasing. And people have a really strong reaction to it, even though it's not necessarily an emotional reaction, but you're just kind of blown away by the satisfaction of this and remembering that in the late 90s, early noughties, someone has made this on a
yeah.
computer, and it's
Yeah,
crazy. And
that is crazy. I think that is also of the curse of like Toy Story is that it was so good, but it was the first one, so people assumed it was easy.
mm,
It's incredible how good that was. Like those were the first computer animated films, and they were so good. But because I guess no one had seen anime, no, there hadn't been a precedent, so people just assumed that was like that must be just easy. But it was they're really impressive films.
yeah, apparently when they were making Monsters Inc., they were like, great, we've got to learn how to do fur. Fur's bloody hard, apparently. And it's the same with even, really early drawn cartoons, like you mentioned Bugs Bunny, but even things like
Yeah.
when you watch Snow White, it's really interesting
Mm.
because from a critical eye, the best part of 100 years later, you could be like, oh, well, it's a bit jaggedy and, this doesn't really move like very naturally. But when you're watching a film like that, you're never thinking about
Uh,
the imperfections of it, and it has
uh,
that ability to draw you in. Whereas, and I guess it's the same with what Surat's doing. Is if you look at it really close, the little girl hasn't got a face, but when you take it as a whole, you don't really care about that.
yeah. Do you know much about this? Because I only know it in its kind of history and pop culture, but I don't know much about where it stands in the art history.
So, once upon a time, I would have known. There's a lot of stuff that I'm like, 3 years ago, I could have told you something about this. But Surat was very interested in like the science of visuals. So he's placing all of these colors next to each other and trying to work out how people react to them. He has a really interesting. He kind of gets a bit obsessed with upwards and downwards lines, which we'd assume are like to do with, if you're in a cartoon
Was
eyebrow is doing that, you're angry. And if a
Oh
cartoon
yeah,
eyebrow is doing that, you're sad.
that's really
Um,
interesting.
and there's a painting he does of the circus where lots of people in the audience are doing stuff with their arms, which is meant to kind of evoke some emotional stuff. So he's getting really into this kind of the science of it. But I think this is such a strange scene as well, like in this kind of Ferris Bueller kind of face off. No one in the scene is looking outwards in a way that looks normal. Everyone is very still and looking in one direction specifically, and the little girl and we assume her mother or her nanny, that are looking
Yeah,
straight at us. And if
yeah.
you were to recreate this with people, it would be strange and maybe creepy.
Someone should do that. I think definitely someone should do a live action version of this and see how. Anyone tried that? Like live action, like restaging of a lot of famous paintings and see what they look like.
I bet someone has. People have a lot of time.
Maybe
Someone did.
that could be the spin off from this
Yeah.
show.
I'm going to
I don't
recreate
know.
all of them. One woman show in Edinburgh 2023. Someone did a recreation of a Rembrandt, but in like the middle of a shopping centre, and people were just kind of going about their business, and suddenly all these people kind of arrived on horses and stuff. I think people are interested in how we bring these older artistic references to life in modern day, and exactly like including it in films.
Yeah.
And bringing those visuals into video games and stuff is a much more palatable way for people to digest art.
Yeah, for sure. Like in a lot of comedy, like Simpsons used a lot of art, used a lot of reference to paintings and art, and sometimes like people's only knowledge of certain paintings is, oh, that's from that scene in The Simpsons. There's a lot of like film scenes. I think people people haven't seen the film scenes, but that's the bit in The Simpsons. That's what they're referencing.
Yeah, I watched. What was it recently? I watched. It's with Robert De Niro, and he's like a baddie, and he rides underneath someone's car, and I only recognise that from Sideshow Bob doing that in The Simpsons.
Yeah, it might be Cape Fear, or
it is Cape Fear. It's
Cape Fear. Yeah, they do a lot of references to that, and I watched The Fugitive with my girlfriend, and there's a lot of Simpsons references to that film.
And I think that is really interesting, and that will be the way round, like you said, for a lot of people, is they see the Simpsons thing or they see it in Ferris Bueller, and then they might then, encounter the art or the film that's being pastiched and then be like, oh, that's what they were talking about. So actually, even though, the Simpsons or the film is making a reference to something that existed before it, actually in a lot of people's cultural minds, that was the original, right?
Yeah.
Kind of going in reverse.
Music as well. Yeah, now music, it's the same with like soundtracks and stuff, that people know the songs are so tied to the film that uses it most prominently.
Or samples in music where you're like, oh, that is actually a completely different song from 50 years ago, but I thought it was Kanye West.
yeah, exactly.
I'm still looking at this, and I haven't had a proper look at it for ages, and I think that's one of the weird things about looking at anything online, is that actually this is massive, but I've got it tiny in one corner of my screen.
I want to actually see a real life version of it. It must be. I wonder if it is as arresting as it is within the scene. As in, like, will I have an existential crisis by looking straight at it? Probably.
Fingers crossed.
Probably. I hope so. Have you ever had an existential crisis just looking at a painting in a gallery?
I don't know whether I'd say an existential crisis. I've definitely had crises. I think, I've had crises where I've been like, I can't believe that this is art, and I can't believe I've chosen to work in this industry. But then I remember there was an exhibition about David Bowie in the V&A in like 2013, 2014, I can't remember exactly. And it had all of, costumes and photographs and stuff like that. And there was a massive projection of him doing some performance. And I just stood there on my own and had a little weep. So, and I don't know whether that's something about the enormity of it, right? Of like, this is like absolutely huge. I think if I watched that performance on YouTube, I probably would only cry a little bit.
I think it is great to weep in public. I recommend people do it. There's a bigger release from it, isn't there?
I have never seen anywhere so filled with people weeping in public than Edinburgh during the film.
Yeah, I was good. I've definitely had my last few public weepings in Edinburgh, just walking through, like, George Street or something.
It's a place full of people with big emotions.
Yeah, it's an intense place.
I think the idea of what is suitable for public and what is suitable for private kind of goes out of the window when you're in a city that is then absolutely full of performers. Like, I'd very happily just kind of walk up the road having a sing, like having a cry.
I think it's probably the best part of Edinburgh is that blurred line of like, what is performance? What is? Are you in a film? You kind of feel like you're in a film when you're walking through Edinburgh.
Yeah, any real life encounter feels a bit like it might be student theatre. Ken, thank you so much for having this chat with me today. Could you let us know where the best place is to follow you and hear what you're up to?
Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter at Ken Cheng Comedy. I guess it's also the same with Instagram, Facebook, or Ken Cheng Comedy, but Twitter is probably the one I use the most frequently. I'm also started Twitch streaming, which is also Ken Cheng Comedy. So just one thing to remember, and just type it into all the different various forms of social media, hoping I have a profile there.
It'll pop up. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow Ken in the ways written below, and as per usual, you can follow me at VerityBabsArt on Instagram. Make sure you're subscribing and give us a like, and I will see you next time.